Okay, here's the thing. Your kids know a lot more about tech than you do. That's just a fact. You might be a tech person and your kid still knows more about tech than you do. They can manipulate computers and phones and iPads far better than you can. And where that becomes an issue is that you're parenting your child at a time where they have access to the entire world at their fingertips. It's tricky. It's tricky when they can manipulate that much better than you can. So what does it matter? And what does it have to do with puberty? And what can you do about it? Well, it matters in terms of puberty because when kids have questions that they can't ask their parent, they will often turn to online resources, right? When you were going through puberty, there were no online resources. There was a book or 2 books. But now you can Google search anything. And when kids do, they often find content. It's often image content that is way more than they were banking on. And in fact, often it's very unreal content. So when your son, for instance, wants to know about anatomy and he's embarrassed to ask you a question about his body and you haven't established the dialogue at all, if he turns to Google and looks up a word because he's kind of curious about something he heard on the bus, suddenly he's got this whole set of images in front of him, many of which are staged or unreal, that are setting expectations for his body, for what he's supposed to do with his body, for what, who his partners will be in life. It's a lot of information, and you can go on any vertical. You can do, talk about sex, you can talk about drugs, you can talk about hormones, and it's all out there, and there's tons at their fingertips, and you can't control any of it. So it is your job, yes, to try to help them curate the content as best you can, but more important, to set a very clear limit, which is you're not ready for this content. You, my 8-year-old, cannot have an iPad because you are not ready for what the iPad has on the other end when you search something. And I cannot emphasize enough how clear I am with parents about limiting tech for kids. I do believe that it's wonderful to let your kids code and build their tech skills in a safe way, but giving your children devices that have access to the internet, that have access to group text and email and all sorts of things that can only end up backfiring when they're very, very young, doesn't help your kid. And remember, their brain is not developed. That frontal lobe of their brain can't make smart long-term choices. And they've got hormones on board, and they've got poor impulse control, and now you're giving them tech and access to the world. So here's my advice. Ready? Don't give them tech until you're sure they're ready. And so across any number of devices, wait until you think they're ready. Just because all their friends have it or say they have it doesn't mean your kid needs it. Number 2, just because you give them a piece of tech doesn't mean you have to give them access to everything. So this is not an all or none phenomenon. For instance, my poor daughter, it's not going to get a smartphone when she gets a phone. She's going to get a dumb phone. Why? Because when she gets a phone, it's going to be for calling or texting us and letting us know when she needs to be picked up and this, that, and the other. She doesn't need to be able to have social media on the bus on the way to middle school. I am probably the only mother who believes this, and yet I believe it because of what I see given what I do for a living. And what I see is that kids love the limits, right? They love being stopped before they're ready to engage in something. And yes, she says to me sometimes, I wish I had this, but more often than not, she says to me, thank you for not letting me get stuck in this cycle of things that I'm not ready for. And she actually does say it. The other thing is, if you've given your child something, don't be afraid to take it away. Just because you gave your kid a phone, let's say you gave your 10-year-old a phone. You had a million reasons to give your 10-year-old a phone. Great, okay. And let's say you regret that decision. Okay, you're the parent. Take the phone back. You can do that. And your child will fight you, and they'll be mad, and they'll cry, and they'll... Okay, right? I mean, you're not going to give your 16-year-old car keys to your car and say, go, have a great time. So practice with the phone and just give them the phone and then decide, okay, I'm going to do a do-over. And tell your child, say, I'm doing this because I think you're not ready yet. And we're going to put it over here. And when you're ready, then I'll give it back to you. It's not all or none. This is not black and white. You're learning. And because your kid is more tech savvy than you are, you actually have to take baby steps.